Okay, so you want to drop out of college, pack up the dorm room, walk away from the degree, and go make your money in the real world. And look, on paper, that sounds like the dumbest financial decision a person can make. Every parent, every guidance counselor, every LinkedIn post from a guy in a suit will tell you a college degree is worth roughly $1 million more over your lifetime than a high school diploma. That's a real number. It comes from Georgetown's Center on Education and the Workforce, and it gets repeated so often it's basically gospel. But here's the strange part. Some of the richest, most successful people alive didn't just skip the extra mile of college. They walked out the door early, and by every financial measure, they came out ahead. Not just Zuckerberg rich, not just lightning in a bottle outliers, but a much bigger, quieter group of dropouts who ran the math, cut their losses, and ended up with more money in the bank than the classmates who stayed and finished. Anyway, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how the economics of dropping out actually work, why the math sometimes favors leaving, why it usually doesn't, and why the whole system is quietly designed to make sure you never do the math until it's too late. Let's start with the true cost of college, not the sticker price. When a university tells you tuition is $58,000 a year, that number is basically fictional for most students. Kind of like the MSRP on a car nobody actually pays. Financial aid and scholarships chip away at it until the real average net price lands around $28,000 to $32,000 a year at a private school, according to the College Board. Public in-state schools average closer to $19,000 with room and board. Even at the cheap option, you're looking at roughly $76,000 for 4 years before a single dollar of interest kicks in. And here's where people mess up the math immediately because they only count the money going out. They forget to count the money that never comes in. Economists call this opportunity cost, and it might be the most underrated number in the entire college conversation. If an 18-year-old skips college and goes straight into a trade or a sales job, they're not just saving on tuition, they're earning a real income for 4 straight years while their classmates live off ramen and loan disbursements. Average entry-level income for that age group sits around $32,000 to $38,000 a year. Multiply that by 4 years and you're talking about $130,000 to $150,000 of income the dropout captured that the graduate simply didn't. Add the tuition saved on top, and a dropout can walk into their mid-20s nearly $200,000 ahead. That's a down payment on a house or 4 years of aggressive investing compounding for the next 40 years. Picture 2 runners. One starts a marathon 4 years late but sprints the whole time. That's the dropout. The other starts on time but walks the first 4 years. That's a college grad right after graduation. Here's a stat that surprises people. According to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, roughly 33% of college graduates end up in jobs that don't even require a degree in their first few years out. They paid for the marathon bib and they're still walking. Meanwhile, the dropout who went into an apprenticeship, learned to code, or started climbing a sales ladder already has 4 years of real experience stacking up. But that head start only matters if it's actually invested in something productive, and this is where the myth busting begins, because dropping out isn't a strategy, it's just an event. There are 3 totally different species of college dropout, and the media only ever shows you one of them. Species 1 is the founder dropout, your Zuckerberg, your Gates, your Dell. These people didn't leave because college wasn't working. They left because something outside of college was working too well to ignore. Zuckerberg didn't leave Harvard because he was struggling. He left because Facebook already had 1 million users and a VC waving a check. This is survivorship bias in its purest form, because for every Zuckerberg, there are thousands of 19-year-olds who dropped out to build a startup and ended up back home within 18 months, no degree, no company, and a resume gap that recruiters treat like a red flag. Species 2 is the trade and skills dropout, someone who realizes correctly that a 4-year degree isn't the only path to a stable, high-paying career. Electricians, plumbers, HVAC techs, welders. These trades routinely pay $65,000 to $110,000 a year within 5 to 7 years, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they get there with 0 student debt because the training is often paid or heavily subsidized. This is the group that actually makes the dropout economics argument work, because they're not gambling on a $1 billion idea, they're just finding a faster, cheaper route to a similar or better income. And species 3, the one nobody talks about because it's not a fun story, is a dropout who leaves for financial or personal reasons and never fully recovers. This is actually the biggest group by far. According to the National Student Clearinghouse, about 40% of students who start a bachelor's degree don't finish within 6 years. This group takes on debt, sometimes 2 or 3 years worth, and leaves without the credential that would let them pay it off with a higher salary. It's like paying for 80% of a house and never getting the keys. The average dropout in this category still leaves with $14,000 to $20,000 in student loan debt, but without the earnings bump a diploma provides. So their debt to income ratio is actually worse than someone who never enrolled at all. So here's the uncomfortable truth hiding underneath all this. The economics of dropping out only work in your favor if you leave with something replacing the degree, a business already gaining traction, a skill the market pays well for, or a trade with a clear income ladder. Dropping out with no plan isn't an economic strategy, it's taking on all the cost of college with none of the payoff, like paying full price for a gym membership and never going. Let's look at how the money actually flows for the ones who get it right, because the numbers feel almost unfair once you see them laid out. Take the coding bootcamp path. An 18 or 19-year-old skips a CS degree, does a 12 to 20 week bootcamp costing $10,000 to $20,000, and lands a developer job paying $65,000 to $85,000 a year, sometimes within 6 months. Compare that to a computer science major spending 4 years and $100,000 to $150,000 total, who often land in the exact same entry-level job at the exact same starting salary. The bootcamp grad is sometimes 3 or 4 years and over $100,000 ahead before the CS grad even starts collecting a paycheck. And that gap doesn't just sit there. If it's invested in something as boring as an index fund averaging 8% annually, that 4-year head start can be worth an extra $300,000 to $500,000 by retirement, purely from compounding. This is the actual engine behind the dropout math. It's not that they're smarter or luckier, it's that time in the market and time earning an income beats a 4-year pause almost every time, assuming the skills actually replace the credential. Now, here's why most people still fail despite this math technically working, because there's a psychological trap baked into all of it. College, whatever you think of it, comes with built-in accountability, deadlines, a syllabus, a degree that acts like a finish line. When you drop out to figure it out, you're removing every guardrail at the exact moment you need discipline the most. This is why so many dropout success stories quietly involve someone replacing college structure with a different, often harsher structure, an apprenticeship with strict hours, a startup with investor deadlines, a sales job with a quota. The ones who drop out and just kind of freelance their way through life with no structure are the ones who drift, and drifting is expensive because every month without meaningful income or skill building is a month working against the dropout math instead of for it. There's also a hidden cost that never makes it onto anyone's spreadsheet. The network effect of a degree. College isn't just 4 years of classes, it's 4 years of proximity to future doctors, lawyers, engineers, and eventually, decision makers. LinkedIn's own research has shown alumni networks are one of the strongest predictors of job placement in the first 5 years after graduation. A dropout misses that entire slipstream. This is part of why founder dropouts almost always come from elite schools. They didn't need 4 years of classes, but they absolutely needed the network they built before leaving. And let's talk about the credentialism tax, because this is where things get uncomfortable for a lot of otherwise capable dropouts. In fields like law and medicine, the degree isn't optional, it's a licensing requirement. You can't practice law without passing the bar, and you can't sit the bar without a law degree. In these fields, dropping out doesn't cost you time. It locks the door entirely. So the dropout math tends to work best in fields where skill is easy to demonstrate directly, coding, sales, trades, entrepreneurship, and works terribly wherever a formal credential gates the door. Zooming out to the bigger picture, average student loan debt in the US cites around $38,000 to $40,000 per borrower according to the Federal Reserve, and total outstanding student debt has crossed $1.7 trillion, more than total US credit card debt. Dropouts default on their loans at more than 3 times the rate of graduates because they often took on the debt without getting the earnings bump that makes repayment manageable. Roughly 40% of student loan defaults come from borrowers who never finished their degree. All the risk, none of the reward. So if you were building a decision tree for whether dropping out actually makes sense, it looks something like this. Do you already have a specific income generating skill or opportunity that's working right now? If yes, and it's already producing revenue or a real offer, the math tends to favor leaving because you're capturing gains that already exist. Do you need this degree as a legal requirement for your intended career? If yes, dropping out isn't really worth entertaining, is your primary reason for leaving financial strain rather than opportunity, that's the one that should trigger the most caution, because leaving due to pressure without a replacement plan is statistically the riskiest version of dropping out. Here's the metaphor that nails this whole thing. College is like a subscription service you pay for 4 years in advance. If you cancel in month 2 because you found a better, cheaper alternative that does the same job, smart move. You saved money and lost nothing. But if you cancel just because you're annoyed with the bill, with nothing lined up, you're not saving money, you're losing access to something you already partially paid for, and you'll probably need a replacement anyway, likely at a worse rate. And that's really the twist ending here. It was never about the degree at all. The degree is just a proxy for the thing that actually determines your outcome, whether you have a scalable, marketable skill someone's willing to pay for. Right now, today. Some people get that skill through 4 years of college and a diploma that opens doors. Some get it through a trade apprenticeship. Some get it by writing code in their bedroom until a startup notices. The dropouts who win financially aren't beating the system, they're just finding a faster, cheaper route to the exact same destination. Valuable, provable skill. The ones who lose aren't failing because they left college, they're failing because they left without anything to replace it. So no, dropping out isn't secretly a genius financial move, and it isn't a reckless disaster either. It's a bet, just like staying is a bet, and like every bet, the odds depend entirely on what you're holding when you walk away from the table. Most people never run these numbers. They just follow the path they were told to follow, or they leave in a moment of frustration without doing the math either way. And that, more than tuition, more than debt, more than any of it, is the real reason this decision ends up making some people rich and leaves others buried in loans with nothing to show for it.